Hancock and I are going to be talking about systems theory and giving you kind of a very quick overview. We've just heard that conflict is a part of the human condition. It's been around since the beginning of humankind, and God is in the middle of it. And conflict, though it can be good, we can get energized by the conflict. We can get new ideas and new things can start to happen. But all too often, conflict doesn't turn out that way. The question is, can we do something about that? Does it have to be that way? And I believe we can. And there are several things that people have done and need to do when there's conflict. One might be to label the antagonist in the room. Maybe we can surround that person with love. But what happens is you get that antagonist under control, and another antagonist pops up and takes their place. Or we can deal with the issues that are facing us. Like, are we going to be traditional or contemporary in worship? Anybody ever hear that? All kinds of other issues pop up and take its place. Sound familiar? So the question is there another way? And we think there is, and we think that way involves systems theory, because systems can help us get to what's going on underneath the antagonist, underneath the issues, and help us deal with the bigger picture so that perhaps we can come to some kind of a meeting of the minds, and maybe more important, meeting of the hearts. Systems theory is nothing new. You learned about systems in elementary school when you studied the solar system, and later on when you studied the human body, or when you learned how a machine operates, how your car runs. And then Edwin Friedman took that idea of family systems and applied it to congregations. He was a Jewish rabbi, and he looked at his synagogues and Christian communities, and he saw that they too seemed to operate as a system. So what does it mean when we say that a family is a system, or a congregation is a system? Well, we mean, first of all, that a system is greater than the sum of its parts. But we all make up one body, and when we are one body, how much more powerful we are. And every member in a system is interconnected with every other member. So then, when one person moves or changes or does anything, every other part of that system is affected. And the focus in family systems theory is how that interconnection operates. We build a system of interactions with one another in our families. We build a system of interactions with one another in our churches. And every part of that system affects the whole, and the whole affects every piece of the system. So when one person in the system acts, all the other parts of the system, whether they know it or not, are affected and are responding. So a family systems theory works that way, and Edwin Friedman says so do our congregations. Somebody, when the anxiety is getting high, sometimes absorbs the anxiety so the rest of the congregation can operate. In a system, everyone has certain ingrained expectations of how they will operate. Some roles are formal, but then some of the roles we play are more informal. You know, the complainer, the fixer, the doer. No one gave them that title, but there are certain people in our congregations that just do certain things all the time, and we almost take it for granted. Systems have rules, and those rules seek to keep the system operating the way it's always operated. You know, the book of discipline. Then there are those informal rules, we don't do it like that around here. We've never done it like that before. Kind of rules that operate in all of our congregations and in all of our families. And they serve a purpose. They keep the system running, and they keep the system stable. It's not necessarily optimal. The system may not be running very well, but it's running. And it's running the way we're used to it running, so we want to keep it that way. Every system has boundaries. Some of them are very closed and tight, So it's very hard to get in the system. It's even harder to get out. And some are very permeable, so that you can flow in and out with ease. Depending on how rigid the roles and the rules and the boundaries are, systems are more or less adaptable. Adaptable to what? Change. So if you have rigid roles and rigid rules and tight boundaries, you're going to have a more difficult time adapting, more difficulty with rolling with the punches. There's good news in all of this. We know that rules and boundaries and systems and all these things are hard to deal with and hard to change. But the good news is that God has given us that free will we talked about before. We do have the ability to think about what we're doing. We can focus on the systems that we're a part of, whether that's our families, our churches, where we work, and we can decide how we're going to behave in those systems. We do not have to resign ourselves to a philosophy that says, that's just the way it is. There's the push to be together, and there's a push to be separate and individual. It's kind of like that song, We Are Family, and I Gotta Be Me, playing in our heads all at the same time. On the other hand, when you're singing I Gotta Be Me with Frank Sinatra loud and clear, you are exerting your individuality. This is based on careful thought. This, again, is not selfish, I don't care about you behavior. This is assuming responsibility for your own happiness, for your own well-being. Not thinking that other people are supposed to make things good for you, but you're going to make things good for yourself. So on a scale, we can see individuation at one end and fusion at the other. And when there's a lot of fusion going on, there's a lot of demands on the relationship, there's a lot of anxiety focused on the other person, and each has difficulty thinking independently. What is it that gets the system out of whack? Anxiety. When anxiety goes up, the system starts to quiver, because anxiety is transferable between people. So people are going to lose sight of their own goals and focus on what everybody else says or what everybody else wants. When you see that high fusion, that's when problems start to develop. And anxiety goes up a lot when change is going to happen. Change raises anxiety. Over and under functioning is one of the problems that results, because there's such close reciprocity between members. Because one person is dominant and then the other becomes submissive and gives up self in the relationship. So one person's doing all the worrying and all the work, and the other person's just kind of sitting back, enjoying life. Conflict happens. This is a pattern of relating. It's marked by times of intense closeness, alternating with times of intense fighting. During the fighting stage, each person experiences a separateness that they desperately need. A breather, a moment apart. They almost fight just to get away. In each phase, each person remains focused on the other. It's positive focus when they're close, and it's negative focus when they're fighting. A triangle is a three-person relationship, and it happens when a twosome gets too intense. Murray Bowen said the most unstable relationship is the twosome, because there's bound to be conflict when two people are constantly relating to one another. So what do? We bring a third party into the mix. And when tension is mild or moderate between the two insiders, and it's not such a bad thing sometimes to bring in the outsider, but when tension gets high, everybody wants the outside position, because that means that they're not in this intense mess anymore, so people start to move out. Distancing occurs when an uncomfortable member moves away, leaves. The prodigal son distanced and cut himself off from his father for a while because he thought he could make it better on his own. Distance is a distancing and cutoff are big problems in a lot of our congregations, because remember, the ones who are leaving the church down the road are coming to your church.